What is the business case, the fundamental business case for green logistics and delivery?
I think there's two things there. Part of it is looking at total cost of ownership of vehicles, and that's very much driven by things like how long can you make them last, and also benefiting from things like increased productivity and reduced maintenance costs. But I think the vehicles themselves can certainly have much lower total cost of ownership, but there are benefits to be had from productivity through things like lower floors in vehicles, making access much easier. So, yeah, there's it's a very positive picture, I think, for the business case going forward.
How do you do it, though, when it comes to the actual steps that you take, Justin, the challenges that you face in decarbonising a fleet of commercial vehicles? Sort of talk us through it.
Okay, so the first thing to do is to really understand the need. So how much goods do you need to take and to where? You then optimise the vehicle to meet that need. That means having the right payload, the right range, and then you look at the best solution for that gives you the lowest possible cost. So for us, that means for any vehicle that you can convert to electric, you should do. So for vans, cars, and light trucks, that's all possible. So that's probably step one. And then it's kind of looking at where the options are, and the vehicle that's most efficient and that can have the longest life cycle is probably the best choice.
Patrick, are there a different set of considerations, though, to the considerations that we make when we're decarbonising passenger cars? Is there something sort of fundamentally different?
There is, yeah. Given the higher price of an electric vehicle versus a petrol passenger vehicle, open market consumers are very willing to go on that journey, almost be early adopters, and know that they'll get that reward over time financially. But for businesses and fleets, even from 5 vehicles to 500, the implications of using a vehicle which is A, more expensive than what they used to, B, slightly less optimized because there are so few options, it stacks up for businesses, and so the cost is really important. And we'll see that purchase price drop down over time, but ultimately businesses shouldn't have to depend on a lower cost of ownership to justify the move to electric vehicles.
And that then brings us to something we've discussed kind of repeatedly throughout the morning, and that's this question of the mix of technologies that ought to be brought to bear. That's probably one for you, Vincente, the mix that needs to be there in order that we get into the direction that we think we want to get in.
Yeah, I think there is a range of technologies that we can look at today, and I think that depending on the geography or the type of operation, it may not be one shoe fits all feet, and we do talk about the move to hydrogen, which I think is exciting and it's interesting, but that is some time away, years. Electrification is here and now. And for certain operations, I think that is exactly where we should be. But for long-haul operations, we need to understand that biogas is absolutely a pressure-tested business case that works. And the importance about decarbonisation is that the planet needs us to take action today and not potentially lose sight of that for a technology that might be valid in a couple of years' time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So there is the opportunity today to have an ecosystem of long-haul transport on biogas, whether that's through bio-waste or bioagriculture, and actually move straight into an electrified form of distribution or logistics, depending on the need. And you can do that today, and you can do it sustainably today in an ecosystem. And that's what we need to do today if we're serious about decarbonisation.
Yeah, so in a sense, if we're in the business of thinking what the best system can be, what the best technology is, then your point is that we miss out on being as urgent as we need to be, I suppose. Is that it?
That is exactly it. And I think some of that is about education, about what is available today. And, as I say, if you're running a back-to-base operation in logistics, You can do that through biogas now. If you want to go into a metropolitan centre, you can do that through an electrified vehicle. We can do that today. My take on it is that people need to understand and we need to help educate that there's a range of technologies that we can offer that aid the decarbonisation effort now. And we shouldn't hang all our hopes on a potential technology that may come 2, 3 or 4 years' time. The action is today. The business case is valid today. And we need to make sure everybody understands what their options are.
Graham, does it make sense to separate out the challenges facing us when we're looking at buses and the challenges facing light-duty vehicles? Is that a proper distinction to make?
I think it's more about looking at it from the start point on the duty cycle and the weight of the vehicle, and then from there you need to look at the best potential solutions for you. So that you have the different technology solutions. If you understand the duty cycle, which is based on weight and load and hours run, then from that you can determine the best option. So inner city, lightweight vehicles, buses, ideally suited to battery vehicles, because you can do the entire duty cycle on a single charge. But if you want to do intercity work, you're starting to look at the need for other technologies, and long haul, as Connolly said there, biogas, perhaps coming to hydrogen fuel cells in the future. So it's very much horses for courses, and the start point really is to sit down and look at the duty cycle, and from the duty cycle look at the available technologies, because it really is a here and now challenge, and you have to make certain that you're not foregoing the future for making it work today. So I think it's really important that all that work is done up front before you make a decision.
Yeah, it really comes back to your point, Vincente, doesn't it, of the kind of range of challenges that there are and potential solutions that there are.
There are a lot of answers to these challenges. It's understanding the infrastructure, and having listened to the majority of the session today, that seems to be one of the biggest challenges, especially when you start to talk about long distance transport. It's very different, a range of passenger cars needing charged, but if you've got 50 or 60 heavy goods vehicles turning up at the one time, we need to make sure that we have the ability to refuel them. And that business case also has to marry up with profitability and driver's hours and everything else. So there are a few challenges here, and that's why I would stress that you have to today look at a range of answers, and electrification is definitely one of them. It's a strong one, but as is biofuels and biogas.
Justin, what are JLP's plans for the decarbonisation of your fuel? Talk us through what you're planning, what you're doing.
Yeah, we're going at it in a pretty aggressive way. So we plan to convert all of our heavy trucks to biomethane by 2028. We're about 40% of the way there already. So that's a very important element for us. Pretty much everything else is going to go electric, and we expect for the whole fleet to be running either on electricity or on biomethane by 2030. So that by that time we'll be completely free of diesel. That will save about 500,000 tons of CO2 and about 240 million litres of diesel. So to go back to Vincent's point, it's really important, I think, to use biomethane now, or biofuels in general now, rather than wait for the kind of the absolutely ideal zero carbon solution. Any impact we can make on carbon right now helps the challenge of getting to zero carbon later on.
Graham, where's the balance between weight and payload when you're looking at the specific challenges for buses and trucks?
So for buses, obviously you're given a payload requirement to move. So these vehicles will move 99 people. You've got a weight limit on the road, 18 tons, or if you're allowed up to 19.5 tons. So that then decides how much weight you can put in for batteries on current technology. So those 18-ton vehicles there carry 99 people and can do up to 200 miles a day on only 300 kilowatts of battery. If you move to truck, You might want the same, so you may be carrying 7, 8, 9, 10 tons of load on the vehicle, but then your problems range. So if you want to add more batteries, then you have to reduce the payload. And I think this is something perhaps we should look towards. What new technology can we use? So where's the lightweighting technology? Where's the more energy efficient systems? Because if we just carry on as we are with heavy vehicles and not thinking about this, then actually we might limit the options open to us. So for me, we should put a lot of effort into the whole aspect, just like aircraft. So aircraft are ahead of us. They put a huge amount of work into lightweighting, and they're saving an absolute ton of fuel. So if we brought that into the truck industry, then you get significantly more range than you currently would, and still carry the same load. Which, of course, the aircraft industry is still carrying the same number of people, but it's reduced its fuel consumption significantly. So I think there's two aspects to this, and I certainly think certainly as UK, we're brilliant innovators, and we should put a lot more effort and energy into the whole aspect of lightweighting and making things more energy efficient, as well as obviously we want more energy dense batteries because that will make a big difference as well.
Patrick, tell us what you're doing to meet the challenges that your customers tell you that they want met.
It's a very good lead-in from Graham there. Yeah, fundamentally, if you take the architecture of a vehicle built around an engine and diesel and just put batteries and power electronics in, it's more expensive, it's heavier. And fleets are suffering for that, and they're paying more for it right now. So at Arrival, we realized quite early that we had to rethink a lot of things. So we developed a completely new architecture for our body structure, a completely new proprietary composite material, which on a 3.5-ton vehicle saves about 200 kilograms on the body structure alone. So really, we have to use a new approach to sustainable mobility to rethink vehicles as well. If we just take everything we've known in the past and continue doing it with batteries, we'll never bring the right level of product offering available to customers.
That then brings me to a question that we've had in from Jack Hunsley from Automotive World, and it is for you, Patrick, and really it is about what you're doing as a company, following up from what you've just said. So what Jack says, we've seen companies like UPS, Amazon putting down sizable EV orders from companies like Arrival. What design requirements are those logistics giants asking for in their future EVs? Is it lightweight? Is it aerodynamic? Is it skateboard chassis, etc., etc.? Are they all on a similar wavelength, Patrick?
Good question. Fleets need a number of different vehicles to run really good optimized functions across the world. So what works well for us in UPS is that we can offer them more than just one vehicle. We're trying to take everything we do to be able to offer products quicker at a lower capital investment, and so therefore we can produce a number of different variants. So that gives them a good optimization. Second part is wanting to rethink the user experience, right? Commercial vehicles right now are designed with carryover content and thinking from passenger vehicles, but for drivers, they're spending each day, every day in these vehicles. So to rethink the definition of what's expected from a commercial vehicle is really important to us. And the final point, really, when it comes to safety, there's a big difference between the compliance of a van right now in vehicles, and we're seeing the safety capability of vehicles in active safety and incident prevention, and also occupant protection getting very good. Vans are too far behind, in our opinion. So really, and also fleets as well, want to see vans and cars a lot more parity in how we prove the vehicle for occupant safety.
Can we turn to the question of infrastructure? Again, something we've been discussing throughout the day, but mainly with regard to passenger cars and the persuasion of people to get those cars in the first place. But from your perspective, this is a question from Chris Ashley from the Road Haulage Association. What is your perspective on the infrastructure that is going to be needed for the different technology options that you are talking about? And as a supplementary, he asked, and it's a pretty important one too, who pays for all of this? Perhaps you'd kick us off, Justin.
Yeah, thanks. I think it partly, the answer is partly for government to provide the financial framework to make the investment for infrastructure happen. So if the technology works because the fuel duty is right, for example, then there'll be a demand from operators to have the vehicles, and that creates a demand for the infrastructure. So that's worked very, very well, for example, on the biomethane infrastructure, which is growing very rapidly. And I think it's the same for EV. It needs some seed funding initially to incentivize people to do trials, but after that, the crucial thing is to create the financial framework, so that the tax regime in particular, that makes it succeed without further subsidy. So yeah, I'm very optimistic that there are companies out there, quite a few with quite deep pockets, who would love to invest in it, as long as the business case is solid over the long term, and that's absolutely key. That there's confidence that the business case is secure for the long term.
Patrick, what's your view of the infrastructure?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point that commercial vehicles have an opportunity where passenger vehicles don't, to do something slightly different in the integration of the vehicle. And for Justin, and as Vincente mentioned, biogas is a good opportunity there. Fleets need good relationships with vehicle providers on this journey as they start understanding their requirements, what vehicles they're going to use, what battery sizes, how are they going to charge them. So I think a good open collaboration between vehicle providers, government and private teams is going to be really, really important.
Vincente, can you turn to the question of who pays?
I tend to follow Patrick and Justin's position. I think ultimately, to get this infrastructure in and running, we need support from government. But long term, it just can't be a short-term blip or an incentive. That there has to be an ongoing business case that makes sense, and operators have to be able to run environmentally in a friendly way. But there has to be a profitability balance here as well, so that they can actually operate to it. So no short or unexpected surprises in taxation would help, and I think that at least that way they can plan. Manufacturers, not just Scania or Arrival, we're all pushing the electrification charge because it makes sense. But for our operators, it has to make commercial sense, not just environmental sense. So I do think there needs to be a start with government incentivisation. I think there has to be collaboration as well across all of the players to make this work. But it has to start that way. But I don't believe a short-term incentivisation is going to deliver as long-term benefits.
Graham, what's your view of how the infrastructure gets set out and eventually gets paid for?
Yeah, I think the important thing here is collaboration and integration. So there needs to be a collaboration across a number of parties, and then there needs to be integration across a number of operators. Because if you take everything in isolation, everybody's fighting for their own slice of the infrastructure. Whereas if you take a more joined up approach, then you'll get a much more efficient and cost effective solution. So I think with electrification is concerned, I think cities need to sit down and actually have an electrification strategy. And I think all companies and all operators need to start working together now to look at how that's going to be rolled out. Because otherwise you'll just end up with isolated hubs, very expensive, and that may, if we're not careful, destroy what we're trying to achieve here, which is basically to save the planet. So I think that's fundamental here is cities need to take lead. Now, you've got C40, which is obviously more than 40 cities now. But I think that is absolutely fundamental to making this happen. And just quickly aside there, and the other technologies. So you can't just look at battery electric. It has to make certain that it can look after the other technologies here to create an integrated transport system and not one that is just biased to one technology. Then all of us can win.
Question from Abhishek Sampat from Delta EE. Traditional refuel has been at bus depots and public sites. In the future, HTVs are probably going to need different technology to minimise downtime. That's expensive, he points out, and the grid connection is difficult and expensive as well. So give us the utopian view. How do you cater for HTVs using today's geographical constraints, assuming money is no object? Graham?
I think this is a big challenge for us all, isn't it? To actually think this through. So, how can we use existing infrastructure to lay the new infrastructure? I think that for me has to be the way to look at this. You've got it available. So, for example, BP and Shell converting garages to electrical charging points, but at the same time making them cost effective by putting cafes, internet cafes. So you're looking here at a complete paradigm change in the way these models take place. And then for traditional bus depots and traditional vehicle depots, again, I go back to my earlier point about you need several technology solutions. So you can't look at anything in isolation. So for me, integrated depot will still be really important, but also looking at the paradigm change to make certain that where things are different, you've got a different solution which actually can make money. So that's my complete picture.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, on those words, complete picture, are very apt ones on which to finish. Thank you all very much.